Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. How are you all doing? I feel like for me, there's excitement about moving towards spring. I probably have shared recently before that I don't love the winter. I don't love cold weather, which probably a lot of you also think is laughable since I live in San Diego. And, you know, we had a solid series of 80 degrees, maybe even 90 degrees days a couple of weeks ago. But I like summer. I like warm. Anywho, besides my weather tendencies, a lot of my clients often ask, we'll have a couple minutes at the end of the session, or, you know, they just kind of think, oh, hey, what's going on in your life? How are you? I love to hear about what you're working on. And I'll share really quickly that for those of you tuning in for the first time or not kind of knowing the whole snapshot, the place that we are at in our lives is that my son is recently recovered from his second brain tumor surgery, and he is headed towards his third to be followed up by 6 weeks of radiation. So, you know, quite honestly, it's not the most fun time we've ever had. There's a lot looming in the air. And I would say that even, you know, sometimes they say practice makes perfect. I would say no matter how many times you go in for surgery or brain surgery or whatever the thing is, it doesn't get easier. Yes, it gets more familiar, but I find that it's uncovering different things every time. And so the thing that I've been working on is surrender. I mean, this probably doesn't come as a big surprise for a lot of you because you've heard me talk a lot about control and trying to manage everything, and again, more control, and just the automatic responses we have as humans. A lot of it is control. It's trying to control our external environment to make us feel in control internally. So I've obviously been trying to do a lot of that, and it hasn't been working as effectively as I would like it to. And so for me, last week was a series of conversations that led to the word surrender. And it has everything to do with connecting my life now with what's beyond me in the sense of my spiritual connection to God, and surrendering, finding peace when it's not available in other places, as in with what's going to happen to my son, with what's going to happen just in the rest of our lives and all the things. So that's a very quick snapshot, but I thought I would share that as we get into this very different type of episode. So I don't know, a couple months ago, I dreamed up this list of books and wrote them all down. And Alex, my right-hand woman, made them look beautiful. So actually, I have a document that accompanies this episode that will be available for you guys just to shout out, and I will send it over to you. But it's a book list. It's a book list of all the books that I kind of broke it down into 3 sections. First section being hospital reads. Actually, what happened was I was in the middle of a book last time we were in the hospital, and I was like, you know what, like this is teetering on some, like I'm afraid for the character that she was going to have some trouble. And I was like, I don't have the capacity to be with this character's trouble right now. I really just don't want to read that. Even though it was a tremendous book, I loved it. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was set in Uganda. It'll come back to me. Anywho, so I asked my friend, I have a friend who is an avid reader and she loves recommending books. And I said, hey, send me over some other books. So I got a couple from her, and I recognized, I'm like, there's actually a handful of books I have that are the perfect hospital reads. For me, the criteria has to be interesting and compelling, like you want to keep reading it, but also completely non-related to anything medical, to anything like real serious, like real life. So romance is always good. So anyhow, I have this really great compilation of books, and I'm going to give a brief synopsis on some of them and kind of why they're on the list. And then I'll go to the next section. So the other sections I have are, I have a personal growth book list category. And then I also have a trauma and recovery book list. So actually, the reason I made this list is because some of my clients, we were working on actually processing emotions. I'm like, do you have any books I can read about that? Which is also ironic because the reason I read these books is because I wanted the same thing. I was like, I got to learn more about this. And then why I say that's ironic is because reading books about feeling feelings, while helpful, is also not feeling feelings. So I think it's ironic that I was driven to these books. My clients are driven to these books. And I will say that they are very, very helpful to lead you into the experience of processing and experiencing your emotions. So let me go back to the first list and let me tell you my top 3. I'll just give you my top 3 of each category. You can get the whole list on the download I have for you. Again, available on the show notes. So there should be a very obvious link for you to get the whole list. So the first book I'll mention from the hospital list is Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. Now, I enjoyed this book. I just thought it was adorable. I feel like it was just a perfect hospital read because I was like hooked. I wanted more. I was intrigued in the story and the characters, and it, for me, offered the most beautiful distraction from my life that didn't create more stress or drama. And so it was just a fun, cute read, had a little bit of love, and I recommend it. So Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. And then the next book I'm going to recommend is called The Midnight Library. It's by Matt Haig. And it was interesting. I don't want to call this book boring, but the time I was transitioning from Flatshare, which was like, I wanted more and more and more. And I was like excited to listen to it. And I never would fall asleep listening to it, to Midnight Library. And it's a much slower pace. I listened to both of these on Audible, but it was actually perfect because the slow pace of Midnight Library, it was still really interesting and very thought-provoking. And again, it was like a really interesting story and interesting character. And I really liked the character development. But what was perfect about this was that it wasn't so interesting that I like wanted to stay up later to read it. It actually really helped me like check out of my hospital brain to be able to fall asleep. One of the most challenging things for me living at the hospital, or even just if maybe you're not at the hospital, but you're in a really stressful or an intense time, is like, so for me, it's hard to shut that mind off. You know, those worries come when you're trying to sleep. And so these books I used specifically as tools to help pass time and to help my mind transition from thinking about life to like sleeping. So that's my next recommendation. And the last book I'll highlight in this category, I have a bunch in this category, is Boys in the Boat. Now, the reason I read this quite a while ago, I didn't actually read it when I was in the hospital, but I think it's a good read. One, it's long. So if you have a lot of hours to pass, that's a plus. And again, it's not the fastest paced book. I think if I was actually reading the book, it would have been a hard book to get through, but I audibled this one. And I love this one because one, it's a true story. So it's actually a memoir, or maybe it's autobiography. So it's a true story. And so thinking about these people's lives to me was like awe-inspiring. And so I like that because, you know, when you're in the hospital, when you're doing really hard things, sometimes it's easy to feel like you're the only one that has had something really hard going on. And two, I think this book really shows you the capacity of human beings. And so I love this book for that reason. It's just really remarkable. And so that one's a definite recommend. So I'm going to, even though I want to talk about all other books because they're really fun for all different reasons, check out the list and you'll get the whole list of the hospital reads. Okay. So I want to move on to the section that I titled Your Personal Growth Book List. The first and definite foremost in this section for me is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I actually did a series on the podcast, I don't know, about a year ago on this book because there are so many helpful nuggets. And something that I share about in the episodes of one of the reasons why I love this book in particular is because he connects your identity, or in other words, like who we believe ourselves to be, with our habits. And I think that is the most powerful driver. Our thoughts are the things that drive our feelings and therefore our actions. And so I like that he doesn't just try to change behavior. He actually looks at the root of who we're being or not being to be able to fulfill our goals. So super easy read, super applicable. And I really like his flavor. His like way he shows up is just really, I think, appealing. So definitely recommend. The next book is called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And I read this one quite a while ago. I think that Gay talks a lot. There's a lot of, again, helpful nuggets in this book too. But the thing that I wanted to highlight about this book is that he talks about how our brains are programmed to look for the problem or the reason to not be basically happy or content. And so he shares personal stories about how his brain was offering up ways for him to step out of the joy that he was actually experiencing to kind of focus on potential and made up negatives. He has great things to say about worry as well. And then he actually gives tangible ways to practice being happier and more fulfilled more of the time. He identifies that this is not something that just happens, that the place that we're at in our lives is that this would require effort. So I like that one. Okay, on to the next one. And I just realized you guys might be hearing like war scenes behind me. My son is home today, unfortunately, with a cold. And so he's watching a movie and it happens to be, not too far from where I'm at. So hopefully you aren't hearing the war in the background. Okay, the last book in this section is Rising Strong by Brene Brown. And many of you probably have already heard of Brene Brown. Hopefully, have already even read this book. But in case you haven't, I wanted to make sure that you, first off, check out anything by Brene Brown. But the reason she's on the list for you all is because she is somebody that studies vulnerability. And I feel like vulnerability and special needs parenting are just, they're two peas in a pod. They go together so well. So I would recommend this book as a place to start if you have not already read anything by Brene Brown. And again, she gives good application for how to kind of think about the things that she shares. And I love that it's all research-based. Like, it's so fascinating, the things that she uncovers. Okay, so moving on to our last category. And this category is what I call trauma and recovery. And probably this list will continue to grow, but the 3 books that I want to mention, firstly, a book called Redeeming Heartache, How Past Suffering Reveals Our True Calling. And this is by Kathy Lorenzel and Dan Allender. In this book, I actually, full disclosure, I'm still a couple chapters away from finishing, but I would say that special needs parenting is filled with trauma. And some are large and obvious, and some are less obvious. And I feel like this book is an incredible tool to start to give language to what your heart has experienced, specifically what I call heartbreak, in order to move through what you've had to move through to be your child's parent. And I feel like it's a start of a conversation. It's an invitation to explore where you find yourself currently now in your journey and where you can move towards. So it is definitely faith-based. So like the perspective is they're both Christian and they're writing with a Christian worldview. And I would invite you, even if that's not what you share as far as your worldview, I do believe that you would still find incredible value from this book and be able to apply it, given that, you're redeeming your heart through your lens. Okay. The second book I want to highlight in this area is a book called Transforming Trauma, and this is by James Gordon. I really love this book. I think this gentleman is a little bit older, and I just feel like there's something about him that he is a very strong and clearly very smart man, but he also is very, very soft and approachable. Probably has to do with that he, works in the area of trauma. First off, I think that this book really is approaching trauma in the more classical, like things that are just so obviously trauma. But I think when you read this as a special needs mom, you'll recognize that, and he even points this out, like that trauma comes from all different places. It's not actually something that happens to you. Trauma is the way you experience something. And I think that's a very important distinction. And so this book I love because it's full of, again, it's tangible, applicable tools and techniques for processing your trauma and literally transforming it. One of my favorites is, and if you've been around for a while, you might have already heard me talk about it, but Shaking and Dancing. So I got Shaking and Dancing from this book specifically, and there's even video resources that the book offers. And it is a technique of allowing the physicality of trauma to move through your body so that you're not essentially holding it all in, trying to keep it below the surface, which, by the way, takes extraordinary amounts of energy and focus. So many tools in this book, and I just love the tone and the sweetness and the softness that he brings. And last thing I'll say about this book is I also love that he talks about basically learning these tools so that you can share them with other people. He talks about basically non-formally trained people being able to learn a few tools and be able to share them with, he's talking about going into communities that maybe have had a very clear trauma, like say an earthquake or something very specific and time-based, or war, something like that. But I love that he actually is equipping people. You don't have to have a degree in therapy to be able to go support and help people. So I love that. Okay. And I was wrong. I actually have 4 categories. That's funny. The last section I have is called Processing Emotions. The book I want to highlight first in this area is How Emotions Are Made: The Secret Life of the Brain. And I just thought this book was fascinating. I feel like she actually has debunked an old theory of how we store and create emotions. And her new theory allows you to play a much bigger role in your emotional life. So I think that that's why this book is on the top of my recommendation list, is because it's not just a study about how emotions are made. It actually gives you more agency to be able to then have a role. I love the way that she says it, have a role in your emotional life. Most of us think that emotions happen to us, and therefore we feel very powerless over feeling anything different. And so I think that this book really shows you how emotions are generated, and then essentially understanding why you react the way you do, and just being able to kind of break it down with more awareness. So I really enjoyed this book. And the last book that I'm going to mention and put in for this category, in our last category, is 90 Seconds to a Life You Love: How to Master Your Difficult Feelings and Cultivate Lasting Confidence, Resilience, and Authenticity by Joan I. Rosenberg. And this book was, again, it was an easy read. I listen to a lot of books, obviously, and I listened to this book. And I love that she does a great job of normalizing the resistance that most of us have against the top, I think she calls them 8 emotions that we mostly resist: sadness, shame, helplessness, anger, embarrassment, disappointment, frustration, and vulnerability. Right? And so after you read that list, you're like, yeah, I definitely avoid feeling all in any of those things. And so I love that she kind of brings it to the light to call it out. But like, yeah, all of us actually probably like to avoid these emotions. And she has very clear language for how to process these feelings. And the reason it's called 90 Seconds to a Life You Love is when you actually process an emotion, it only takes about 90 seconds. Which I think is a little bit mind-boggling. And if you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Kara, when you say process an emotion, well then, first off, let's talk. We can just have a quick conversation. I can tell you more about what I mean about that. But then also, any of these books would be a great place to start, to recognize that, emotions are stored in our body, and actually we experience them not by thinking about them, by actually feeling them. And so when we stop feeling, or we kind of suppress feeling anything, imagine it's like a river that you have just completely clogged up. So, and that's not just the negative feelings, it's all the feelings. So a lot of us feel numb or just foggy, or just basically very disconnected in life after we've gone through a difficult season or event, or gosh, even the whole life of your child. Likely it's related to you buffering against not feeling some of these powerful emotions. Okay, well, my objective was to keep this episode relatively short, and I'm very proud of myself because I think I nailed it. Okay, and hopefully I didn't talk too fast. I feel like I got a little excited there. Let's wrap this episode here. And again, the resource I made for you is available if you go ahead and look on the show notes, and there'll be an easy place to put your information in so I can send it on over to you. And let me know if you've read any of these books, and if you have any that you're like, you have to add this to your list. That would be really fun. The list can keep growing, and I can keep updating it as we go. And while I wrap this episode up, I just have one little request and reminder, and no surprise, it's, will you take a second to rate and review or share this podcast? It just helps so much to have people hear what other people say about a podcast before they dive in, as they're kind of making a decision on how to spend their quality listening time. And so I would really appreciate that. And then, of course, if there's somebody that you can think of that maybe it's like a friend that you just love learning with, and you're like, oh my gosh, let's look at this book list and let's choose a book and let's read it together. That would be so much fun. So make sure you share this episode with your community, and we will all grow together. We will see y'all on the next episode. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.